Why is it so difficult to stop eating crappy foods in your diet? Well, I don't know for sure. Mostly because the brain is a very complicated device, and eating highly processed foods triggers the same sort of pathways as other addictive behaviors such as smoking. So that could give you a little bit of an insight. And what we got here today is addictive and unhealthy. Foods high in added fats and refined carbs have a lot in common with cigarettes. All right. Every year, millions of Americans try to cut down on ultra-processed foods. Industrial formulations that are typically high in added fat, refined carbohydrates, or both. Think cookies, cakes, potato chips, and pizza. For many, the desire to change what they eat is triggered by concerns about potentially life-threatening health conditions like diabetes and heart disease. The impact of diet on health is not a small problem, according to a study commissioned by The Lancet, a multidisciplinary commission of 37 leading scientists from around the globe. That's a lot, and they're experts. We should defer to them. Identified unhealthy dieters as a greater risk to human health than unsafe sex, alcohol, drug, and tobacco use combined. But what about those goddamn anti-vaxxers? Anyways, many people know that most ultra-processed foods are not healthy, yes, but the goal of cutting down on them can be so challenging that a majority of these attempts fail. Why? Well, we got a study. Ultra-processed foods may be addictive, sharing more in common with tobacco products than whole foods like apples or beans, which if you watch yesterday's video, beans are good for you and they'll make you live longer, but not Oreos. Darn it. The author of this is a clinical psychologist who studies addiction, science, obesity, and eating disorders, or disordered eatings to those who aren't dyslexic. During my training at Yale University, not me, never got accepted. Maybe they're still processing my claims some 13 years later. It became clear to me that many people who were showing classic signs of addiction in their relationship with ultra-processed foods, symptoms such as loss of control over consumption, intense cravings, and the inability to cut down the face of negative consequences. So my colleagues and I created the Yale Food Addiction Scale as a measure that applies to American Psychiatric Association criteria used to diagnose other addictive disorders to identify people who may be addicted to ultra-processed foods. All right. Based on the current estimates, 15% of Americans meet the threshold of food addiction. That's not very many, but there are a lot of fat people out there. Fat in the sense that they can help it, which is associated with diet-related disease, obesity, and poor quality of life. This prevalence is remarkably in line with that of addictions of other legal and accessible substances. For instance, 14% of people in the United States meets the criteria to be diagnosed with alcohol use disorders. It is clear from our research that people don't experience this addictive pull from all foods. Ultra-processed foods have the artificially high levels of fat and refined carbohydrates like sugar, white flour, and the ones that people eat addictively. For example, chocolate, ice cream, french fries, pizza, and cookies all have the same sort of foods that people find most addictive. Not surprisingly, people report that they're very unlikely to lose control consuming broccoli, beans, or cucumbers. What's wrong with you people? Well, I know a certain website that really loves the consumption of cucumbers, but that's another story for another channel. But can these ultra-processed foods really be considered addictive? Well, it sure seems that way. The idea that tobacco was addictive was hotly contested for decades. I think it's pretty much settled now at this point, but let's indulge in this. In contrast to drugs like alcohol and opioids, tobacco products are not intoxicating and allow people to go about their daily lives while using them. With a little bit of a buzz on, I guess. Tobacco products can also cause life-threatening withdrawal symptoms. Can they? I didn't know that. Unlike alcohol and opioids, there is no need to break the law to access or use tobacco. Oh, they don't cause life-threatening withdrawal symptoms. I misread that, okay? I don't want to misinform you guys. I had to go back and reread that because that didn't seem right at all. But yeah, alcohol and opioids do cause withdrawal symptoms. That's why it is dangerous to stop either cold turkey. And that's why it's so difficult for a lot of people to break that addiction cycle. Largest global tobacco companies, colloquially grouped together as Big Tobacco, often highlight the difference between tobacco and classic addictive drugs, increasing doubt about whether tobacco was truly addictive. Wow, Big Tobacco running a propaganda scheme? Who could have possibly thought that would ever happen again? Increasing doubt, to avoid culpability of their industry practices and place the blame on consumers for their choice to continue to smoke. However, in '88, wow, I wasn't even alive yet, Surgeon General officially identified tobacco products as addictive. Nah, what does he know? He just got a fancy jacket. This report directly contradicted Big Tobacco's stance that tobacco intake is a matter of consumer choice driven by taste and sensory effect of their products. 4 out of 5 doctors agree that Lucky Strike has a smoother pull than its competitors. What? The Surgeon General based much of the classification of tobacco products as addictive on their ability to trigger strong, often irresistible. Those other words aren't words. Urges to use despite a desire to quit in the face of life-threatening consequences. Wow, what else does that sound like? Another piece of evidence was the ability of tobacco products to rapidly deliver high doses of nicotine, which made them highly reinforcing. Users want to repeat the behavior that gets them more of the drug. They're really teeing this up. The final addiction criterion tobacco met was the ability to alter mood, increasing pleasure, reducing negative emotions, because nicotine affects the brain. It is a common misconception that the designation was based on the identification of a specific brain response to tobacco. In the 80s, researchers knew that nicotine had some impact on the brain, but little was known at the time about exactly how addictive drugs affect the brain. In fact, an objective biological marker of addiction, that is, a specific measurable brain response that confirms someone is addicted to a substance, still doesn't exist. Surgeon General designating tobacco as an addictive product raises the percentage of the people who viewed smoking as an addiction from 37% in 1980 to 74% in 2002. Who are those other 26% that just live in the dark? The scientific case that cigarettes are addictive also made it harder for Big Tobacco to defend its practices. Again, like, some people still don't believe that they're actually dangerous to your body, but I think everybody kind of realizes that they're addictive and that they're really, really addictive. But again, that was 19 years ago. Wow, okay. In 1998, tobacco companies lost the legal battle that resulted in them paying billions of dollars to states to cover smoking-related health costs. And they're still in business today, still churning out millions and billions of dollars, so it really hurt them. The court ordered them to release secret documents that demonstrated they covered up the unhealthy and addictive nature of their products. They knew, and they did nothing. Additionally, the decision placed major restrictions on the ability to market their products, especially to the youth. Exactly, no more flavored cigarettes, but you can't buy flavored vapes, which is fucking weird. Oh, every once in a while, one sneaks through, whatever. I just think vaping is the dumbest thing you can do, but hey, then again, I don't like to suck a little robot dick. Oh, if we got one, we got two, whatever. Since 1980, the use of tobacco products in the United States has drastically declined, a huge public health accomplishment. Really? Because I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of a story from around these parts up here in the wonderful city of Grand Prairie, Alberta, Canada. I see so many people smoking, and it might be for the fact that this is basically an oil field town, and smoking is just about somebody having a pack of smokes is just about as common as somebody having a hard hat. It is. I think it's disproportionate up here, and then in the surrounding supporting municipalities. I don't think that it's really dropped off that much, at least in my lifetime. I'm sure for every smoker that does drop off, there's another one born every day. Like in my family, not a very big family, but half the people in my family smoke because it makes them look cool. Sure. Ultra-processed foods check the same boxes. What? No. So is a hostess gonna have to shell out billions of dollars because of obesity costs in hospitals? That'd be fun. Ultra-processed foods meet all the same criteria that were used to designate tobacco as addictive. Then why are we waiting so long? Why is it during the great shutdown of 2020 and parts of 2021 because governments are stupid. Why were the highly processed food industries allowed to stay open? Meanwhile, everything else was shut down. Really gets the old noggin jogging now, doesn't it? It's almost like they want to keep people just sedated in their comfortable stupor. Anyways, tobacco and ultra-processed food alter mood in similar ways by increasing pleasurable feelings and reducing negative ones. High level of refined carbohydrates and fat in ultra-processed foods powerfully activate reward systems in the brain. Ultra-processed foods are highly reinforcing, and they can shape your behavior to keep you coming back for more. For examples, teachers and parents use ultra-processed foods as a reward for good behavior in children to increase the likelihood that the kids will continue to behave. In rats, researchers have repeatedly found that sweet tastes are more reinforcing than even cocaine. Interesting. High failure rates of diets make it painfully clear that ultra-processed foods can trigger strong, often irresistible urges to use despite a desire to quit. By contrast, nutritious and minimally processed foods such as fruits, vegetables, and legumes don't meet the criteria for addiction. Huh. Well, maybe, because you need them to survive, but okay, no, I get where you guys are going. Beginning in the 1980s, a very popular decade, I guess, the amount of unhealthy, ultra-processed food in the United States exploded. At the same time, the tobacco companies Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds were buying up ultra-processed foods and beverage companies, including General Foods, Kraft, Nabisco, and Kool-Aid. Wow, I wonder why. Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds took their scientific marketing and industry knowledge in designing and selling addictive, highly profitable tobacco products and applied them to ultra-processed food portfolios. And where are a lot of those very colorful packages, where are they marketed towards? The same group of people that can't be marketed to by the regulation of the tobacco industry in the 90s? Wow, imagine that. Although those tobacco companies eventually sold their food brands and international food and beverage conglomerates in the 2000s, yeah, basically there's like 6 mega companies that just kind of rule the world. Mars, Procter & Gamble. Those are just the ones that come off the top of my head. But yeah, forced to sell off in the 2000s, they had already left their stamp on the modern food environment. Yeah, just take a look at packaging and marketing for proof of concept. The current societal narrative around the ultra-processed foods that dominate today's food environment is that people who struggle to eat them in moderation, the majority of Americans, are just weak-willed. It's the same story used to explain why people couldn't stop smoking. It ignores the fact that the industry that created cigarettes also developed and marketed many of these foods, deliberately working to enhance craveability and create heavy users, theoretically and metaphorically. The addictive nature of these ultra-processed foods undermines consumers' free will and health in the service of profit. Yet it's an important difference between tobacco and ultra-processed foods. We all have to eat. No one can opt out. That's an unfortunate fact of life. Because boy, if I never had to eat, I wouldn't. I think it's a huge waste of time, but it's just a fact of life. Now, do I wholeheartedly agree that food is an addiction, whereas other dangerous substances, that those are legitimate addictions? Yeah, obviously. Do I think it's a disease though? Oh gosh, that's an entire different conversation, but it's interesting to find out, well, I didn't actually know that a lot of these different brands were once owned by big tobacco corporations. That's very funny. It doesn't surprise me or anything. It's just kind of reinforcing the fact that big tobacco are scumbags. But the fact that they trigger the same responses in people, not activate the same areas of the brain, because as we found out, that doesn't exist. I find that very interesting. And this article right here was probably one of the more interesting ones that I've come across in a while, and I'm really happy to share that with you guys. But with that said, I thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.